Under the bright lights of the international airport, travelers hurried in every direction. The sound of rolling suitcases, flight announcements, and impatient footsteps filled the air. In the middle of this chaos walked an older woman with gentle eyes and silver hair. She held her small handbag close and moved carefully, step by step. She was tired after her long journey. Her face showed years of wisdom and quiet strength, but her body carried the weight of age. She expected help. Maybe a smile, maybe a little respect after all. Airports were supposed to serve people, not break them. As she reached the counter, she placed her ticket on the desk with a polite smile. The staff behind the counter barely looked at her. Their faces were cold, their tone sharp. They seemed more interested in joking with each other than doing their job. One of them looked at her luggage and smirked. His voice carried loudly so other passengers could hear. He said her suitcase looked too heavy for her, that maybe she should have stayed home instead of traveling. His co-workers laughed. The sound stung like needles. People waiting in line glanced over, but no one said a word. She kept her smile weakly, trying to stay calm. She explained softly that she was here to see her family, that this trip meant everything to her. But the staff interrupted, rolling their eyes. One of them told her to hurry up, that she was holding the line. Another sighed loudly as if she was wasting everyone's time. The old woman's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her documents. She was embarrassed, not because of her mistake, she had done nothing wrong, but because of the way she was being treated in public. The humiliation grew worse when the staff began to raise their voices. A young worker leaned across the desk and said slowly, as if she could not understand, "Do you even know what you are doing?" The words cut deep. It wasn't just the question, it was the tone, the way it was meant to make her feel small. She looked down at her hands, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. For a moment she thought of her son. How kind he always was. How he reminded her to be strong. But here, surrounded by strangers, she felt powerless. Other travelers saw everything. Some frowned, some looked away. No one wanted to get involved. The busy airport moved around her, but in that small space it felt like the whole world had turned against her. The staff laughed again when she fumbled with her papers. One of them muttered something under their breath, but loud enough for her to catch. It was a cruel comment about her age. She felt her cheeks burn with shame. Her throat tightened, but she refused to cry. She thought, if she could just get through this moment, it would be over. But the staff did not stop. They acted as if mocking her was entertainment. They leaned back casually, pointing to her bag, saying it should be thrown on the scale roughly. They didn't even try to hide their disrespect. The old woman stood there silently, her dignity crumbling. Every second stretched like an eternity. She wondered if this was how the world now treated people like her. People who had lived long, given love, raised families, but were now seen as nothing. She looked around helplessly, searching the crowd, and that was when her eyes briefly met. Someone standing a few feet away, a man in a baseball cap, quiet, still. He carried no expression, but his eyes held a sharpness that others missed. He had been there the entire time, watching, not interfering, but not ignoring either. She turned back to the staff, hoping they would finish quickly, unaware that the man was no ordinary traveler, unaware that her humiliation had not gone unseen. The staff handed her documents back roughly, without even a thank you, as though she was an inconvenience. She picked them up with shaking hands, her heart heavy. Around her, the crowd kept moving, but for her, the noise of the airport felt distant. All she could hear was the echo of their laughter. She had traveled the world before, she had seen good and bad, but she never imagined she would be treated this way. At an airline that her son often spoke of, at a place where she thought she would be safe. She adjusted her scarf, took a deep breath, and tried to hold her head high. But deep inside she carried the sting of humiliation. What she did not know, what no one in that line knew, was that the quiet man in the cap was about to change everything. The very people who mocked her would soon realize the truth, and the balance of power would shift in ways they never expected. But for now the old woman simply stood there, humiliated, her dignity bruised, unaware that justice was only a heartbeat away. The old woman stood silently near the gate, her boarding pass in hand. Her eyes looked tired, not just from the long journey, but from the pain of being humiliated in front of strangers. She found a seat near the corner, away from the crowd, and lowered herself gently into the chair. She didn't want to cry, but her throat felt tight. She had always taught her son to treat others with kindness. She had believed the world still carried some of that kindness. But now, after what had happened, she wasn't so sure. She clutched her small handbag and stared at the floor. Her fingers trembled slightly. It wasn't the first time someone had spoken rudely to her, but this time, it had happened so publicly, so cruelly, and she wasn't just anyone's mother. She was the mother of a man the world respected, a man who had lived through pain and loss but still chose to be kind to everyone, unknown to her. The man in the cap, the one who had witnessed everything, was no longer standing still. He had quietly walked toward a nearby gate agent and whispered something. The agent's eyes widened in shock when he recognized who he was talking to. He nodded quickly, then disappeared through a side door. The man didn't cause a scene. He didn't raise his voice or demand attention. Instead, he walked slowly toward the very staff who had mocked the old woman. They didn't notice him at first. They were too busy laughing about something else. As he got closer, one of them finally turned around and his face dropped. The smile vanished, and his eyes darted toward the others in panic. One by one, they turned and their expressions changed from boredom to fear. It was like a scene from a movie. The man took off his cap slowly, and now, everyone could see his face clearly. It was Keanu Reeves, the Keanu Reeves. Passengers nearby began whispering and pointing. Some took out their phones, others froze in disbelief. But Keanu didn't care about the attention. He had only one goal, and that was to make sure his mother was treated with the dignity she deserved. The staff tried to act polite all of a sudden. One of them stuttered, trying to explain something, but Keanu raised his hand slightly. He spoke softly, but his words carried weight. He asked why the woman they had just insulted was treated so poorly. He asked why no one offered help when she clearly needed it. There was no anger in his tone, but there was deep disappointment. The staff looked like they wanted to disappear. One of them mumbled an apology, but it was weak and empty. Keanu didn't accept it, not yet. He told them that the woman they had disrespected was not only his mother, but also someone who had taught him everything he knew about being kind, humble, and strong. The silence around them grew thick. More people were watching now. Security came closer but didn't interrupt. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next. Back at her seat, the old woman looked up and noticed the crowd gathering. She stood slowly, a little confused, and then she saw him, her son standing tall in front of the very people who had embarrassed her. She walked closer, unsure of what was going on. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear, but from emotion. Keanu turned and smiled gently at her. That one smile erased some of the pain from her heart. She reached him and whispered, "You didn't have to do this." But he shook his head and said, "No, Mom, I did." He turned back to the staff and said they owed her a real apology, not just words, but sincere regret for how they had made her feel. The staff, now sweating and pale, lowered their heads and apologized, this time with real emotion in their voices. Keanu watched their faces closely, and only when he felt they truly meant it, he nodded. The gate manager arrived moments later, trying to take control of the situation. But when he saw Keanu, he too froze. Keanu calmly told him what had happened, and the manager apologized as well, saying it would never happen again. He offered to escort his mother personally to the VIP lounge and made sure her boarding was handled with care. Keanu turned to his mother and offered his arm. She took it, smiling, the sadness on her face beginning to fade. The crowd that had gathered watched silently. Some clapped softly, others wiped their eyes. Everyone had just witnessed something rare, a moment of quiet power, of dignity restored without anger or shouting. As Keanu and his mother walked away together, the old woman leaned closer and said, "You always stand up for others, even when—" "You don't have to," he replied. "You raised me that way." The staff stood frozen as they watched them leave. The laughter they had enjoyed earlier was gone now, replaced with silence and regret. They knew they would remember this day for a long time. They had learned a lesson not from threats or punishment, but from a man who chose kindness even when he had every reason to be cruel. The old woman walked tall again. Her heart lifted, not just because her son stood up for her, but because he had reminded the world what true strength looks like. The VIP lounge was quiet and peaceful, far from the noise of the busy airport inside. Soft music played and the lights were warm. A young staff member gently pulled the chair out for the old woman and placed a soft pillow behind her back. She gave a small nod of thanks, but her eyes stayed fixed on her son. She still couldn't believe what had just happened. Moments ago, she was humiliated by people who saw her as nothing. Now, those same people had apologized in front of a crowd, all because of the quiet man in a cap. Her son, Keanu Reeves. Keanu sat beside her, his face calm as always, but his eyes kept watching the entrance of the lounge, as if he was making sure no one else would come to bother his mother again. He didn't speak much, only asked if she was okay and if she wanted water or tea. She smiled, a tired smile, and said, "I'm better now." But deep inside, something still bothered her. She wasn't a woman who liked attention. She didn't want special treatment just because of who her son was. She whispered, "I hope you didn't do it just because of me." Keanu turned his head slowly and looked into her eyes. He said, "No, Mom. I did it because it was wrong. I would have done it for any elderly woman, not just you." His voice was soft but steady, and she knew he meant every word. That was how he had always been, even as a child. She remembered a day when he was only 10 years old and stood between a stray dog and a group of bullies. He got scratched and hurt, but he didn't back away. She had raised him to care about people, but sometimes it felt like he had gone beyond what she had ever imagined. While they sat there, a few of the airline's senior staff entered the lounge. Their uniforms were crisp and their faces serious. They approached slowly and asked if they could speak with Keanu privately. He stood and nodded, walking with them to the side of the room. The old woman watched quietly, her hands folded in her lap. One of the senior officials apologized deeply for the earlier behavior. He explained that the airline took full responsibility and had already started reviewing the actions of the ground staff. Keanu didn't ask for punishment. He only asked one question. "How do you plan to make sure this never happens again?" They promised better training, more focus on treating passengers with respect, and personal follow-up with the staff involved. Keanu listened carefully, then said something that surprised them. He told them he wasn't looking for revenge or headlines. He just wanted a simple thing: for every person, rich or poor, young or old, to feel respected when they walked through those airport doors. The officials nodded, impressed by his words. They had expected anger, maybe demands or threats, but instead, they found themselves learning something from a man who didn't speak loudly, but whose actions had made a loud impact. Back at the table, his mother sipped her tea slowly. She didn't hear the conversation, but she saw the body language. She saw her son standing there, not just as an actor or celebrity, but as a man of quiet power, someone who made people think without even raising his voice. Soon, Keanu returned to her side. He said everything was taken care of and she didn't have to worry anymore. She nodded, but then gave him a curious look. "Why didn't you tell them who you were right away?" she asked. He smiled. "Because it's not about who I am, it's about what they did." Those words stayed in her heart. They reminded her again why people loved her son so much, not just for his movies or fame, but for his character. As they waited for their flight, a young couple came near their table. The woman said politely, "Excuse me, sir. I don't want to bother you, but we saw what happened, and I just wanted to say thank you. My grandmother was once treated badly at an airport too, and no one stood up for her. You did what most people don't." Keanu smiled and said, "Thank you. That means a lot." After they left, his mother leaned closer and said in a quiet voice, "I'm proud of you, not for being famous, but for staying good." He reached over and gently held her hand, saying, "That's because I had the best teacher." The rest of the time in the lounge passed peacefully. No one else disturbed them. No more rude comments, no more laughter at her expense. Just calm, comfort, and quiet respect. For the first time in hours, the old woman closed her eyes and relaxed, not because of the soft chair or the fancy tea, but because she knew her son had turned a painful moment into something powerful. Not just for her, but for everyone watching. And as the boarding call finally came, she stood up with her head high, holding her son's arm, ready to continue her journey. Not as a helpless passenger, but as the proud mother of a man who reminded the world what true kindness looks like. The soft voice of the gate agent echoed through the lounge, announcing final boarding for their flight. Keanu stood up first, then gently helped his mother to her feet. She held onto his arm, her step slow but steady. Together they walked toward the boarding gate. The airline had already arranged for them to board early, so they wouldn't have to stand in line. As they approached the gate, a few staff members stepped aside respectfully. Their expressions had changed from before. No longer proud or careless, but careful and quiet. Some even looked nervous. Others gave small, respectful nods. Keanu didn't say anything, and his mother didn't look at them either. Not out of anger, but because she didn't want to live in that moment again. They walked through the jet bridge slowly. Her legs were still tired from all the standing and waiting earlier. Keanu didn't rush her, not even once. He held her bag with one hand and let her lean on the other. His silence spoke volumes. It said, "Take your time, I'm here." Inside the plane, the air was cool, and the lights were dim. A flight attendant greeted them with a warm smile. She led them to 2 first-class seats near the window. Keanu had booked the seats weeks ago to surprise his mother. She had never flown in first class before, but he had told the airline to keep it simple. No grand gestures, just quiet comfort. The seats were wide and soft, and the space around them was calm. His mother sat down carefully and looked around with a small smile. "This is very nice," she whispered. Keanu smiled back and said, "Only the best for you." As they settled in, a different flight attendant approached nervously. Her eyes flicked between Keanu and his mother. Then she spoke in a soft voice. "Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to say, we are deeply sorry for how your mother was treated earlier. It was wrong and we're ashamed it happened on our watch." Keanu nodded once and said, "Thank you for saying that." His tone was gentle, not angry, but honest. The woman looked relieved, then turned to his mother and added, "Ma'am, you deserve respect and we failed. I hope you'll forgive us." The old woman gave a small nod. "I do," she said quietly. "Just remember this next time you see someone who looks like me." The flight attendant promised she would, then left them to rest as the plane began to move. The lights outside the window blurred into long streaks of gold and white. The city was slipping away beneath them, and a new chapter was beginning in the sky. Keanu reached into his bag and pulled out a small blanket. He placed it gently over his mother's lap. She smiled and held his hand for a moment. No words were needed in that silence. They shared something deeper than any apology could offer. After takeoff, a few passengers in first class recognized Keanu. They whispered among themselves but didn't disturb him. One elderly man in the row behind leaned forward and said softly, "I saw what you did at the gate, son. That was a fine thing." Keanu simply replied, "Thank you, sir," and turned his attention back to his mother. A few minutes later, the pilot made an announcement. His voice came through the speaker, calm and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for flying with us today, and a special welcome to one of our most respected passengers and his guest, Mr. Reeves. We are honored to have your mother on board." People began to clap quietly, not for fame, not for a movie star, but for a man who stood up for someone when it mattered. The old woman looked around, a little embarrassed, but Keanu just smiled at her. "See?" he whispered. "You're the real VIP here." She laughed softly, and for the first time that day, her laughter wasn't forced or nervous. It was real. As the flight continued, she leaned her head back and closed her eyes. Her son reached for a book, but before he opened it, he looked at her. She looked peaceful now, relaxed. as if the heavy weight on her heart had finally lifted. He knew that the rest of the world might forget what happened that day, but he never would. He had seen the pain in her eyes, and he had made sure it was replaced with peace. That was what mattered. That was why he didn't shout or fight. Because real strength was quiet. It didn't need to make noise. It just needed to make change. And sitting there beside the woman who raised him, Keanu knew he had done the right thing, not just as a son, but as a man. The plane moved smoothly through the clouds far above the busy world below. Inside the cabin, the lights were dimmed and a quiet peace filled the air. Keanu sat quietly beside his mother, glancing at her every few minutes to make sure she was comfortable. She looked calm now, her hands resting gently on her lap, her eyes closed as she breathed slowly and deeply. For the first time that day, her face looked relaxed, the lines of stress softened by the kindness she had finally received. A flight attendant brought them warm towels and asked if they needed anything else. Keanu politely shook his head and thanked her. His mother opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "You always knew how to make things right without making a mess," she whispered. Keanu leaned closer. "I just wanted them to see who they were really speaking to," he said. "Not because you're my mom, but because you're a person who deserves respect." She nodded, but deep in her heart she still carried a question. "Would they have treated me better if they knew who I was from the beginning?" she asked gently. Keanu thought for a moment and then replied, "Probably. But that's the problem, isn't it? Respect should never depend on who you are or who you know." His mother looked at him with soft eyes, proud but also a little sad. "The world isn't always fair," she said, "but you make it feel a little less cruel." Keanu didn't reply right away. He just took her hand and held it quietly. Later, as the plane sailed through the sky, a young flight attendant approached again. She looked a bit nervous but sincere. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "may I ask you something personal?" Keanu nodded. "Of course." She hesitated, then asked, "Why didn't you just shout at the staff earlier? Most people would have lost their temper." Keanu smiled gently. "Because shouting doesn't teach anyone anything. If I had screamed, they would have remembered the anger, not the lesson." The flight attendant nodded slowly. "I wish more people thought that way," she said, then added, "I want to be better at my job, especially after today." Keanu said, "Then start with the people others ignore, the tired ones, the scared ones, the ones who seem too small to matter. They need your kindness the most." She thanked him and walked away, her heart a little fuller than before. As the hours passed, the cabin grew quieter. Most passengers had fallen asleep, but Keanu and his mother remained awake. Their conversation was soft and warm, touching old memories. She told him stories from his childhood, moments he had forgotten, like how he used to open doors for elderly neighbors or how he once gave away his favorite toy to a crying child. "You've always been like this," she said, "even before the world knew your name." Keanu smiled. "You taught me that, Mom." She looked out the window at the stars beyond. "Do you think those people at the airport learned something today?" she asked. Keanu looked thoughtful. "Maybe not all of them, but even if one of them treats someone better tomorrow, that's a start." His mother nodded. "Small ripples can become waves," she said. Keanu liked that thought. It was how he lived his life, doing small things quietly, believing they would matter to someone somewhere. Suddenly, a message came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're starting our descent. Please fasten your seatbelts." The plane tilted slightly as it began to lower. The lights brightened a little and the cabin woke from its rest. Keanu gently helped his mother with her seatbelt. She smiled at how careful he was. "You never treat me like I'm old," she said. He chuckled. "Because to me, you're still the strongest person I know." As the city lights below came into view, both mother and son watched quietly. The moment felt like a new beginning, not just of a flight ending but of something more. The hurt of the day hadn't disappeared, but it had been answered. With kindness, with dignity, and with truth. When The plane landed. The wheels touched down gently and a soft cheer rose from the passengers. Keanu and his mother waited as others stood up. They weren't in a rush. There was no need to fight for space or hurry through the doors. They had already won something more important than time. When it was their turn to leave, the flight attendants stood in a small line near the exit. One by one, they nodded or thanked Keanu's mother with honest faces. She gave each of them a kind smile, not out of pride, but because forgiveness was something she believed in. Outside, the air was cool and fresh. The airport crew had prepared a car to take them directly from the tarmac to the terminal. A young man opened the door and said, "We're honored to have you with us, ma'am." She stepped inside, feeling lighter than before. As the car drove off, Keanu looked at her and asked, "Are you okay now?" She smiled fully this time. "I am. Not because I was treated like a queen, but because I saw how you treated others. That's what healed me." Keanu looked out the window and replied softly, "Then maybe we both needed this day, for different reasons." And the car disappeared into the night, carrying two people whose bond had only grown stronger through one painful, beautiful, unforgettable journey. The car moved slowly through the quiet airport roads. The city lights in the distance sparkled like stars on the ground. Keanu sat beside his mother, both of them silent for a moment. His mother leaned her head gently against the seat. She looked out the window, watching the lights blur past. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, but her heart still carried pieces of the day. She turned to her son and said, "I never thought something like this would happen to me at this age." Her voice was soft, not angry, just surprised. Keanu looked at her and nodded. "I didn't think so either, Mom, but I'm glad I was there." She smiled, tired but proud. "You always show up when I least expect it," she said. "You were supposed to meet me at home, not surprise me at the airport." He gave a small laugh. "I wanted to be the one who welcomed you back, not just at the house, but from the moment you arrived." She reached over and squeezed his hand. Her grip was weak, but her heart was strong. "You always do more than expected," she said. "But what you did today, that was something else." The car turned toward a private terminal, away from the crowded exits. It was quiet here, peaceful. The driver opened the door for them, and Keanu helped his mother step out. A small team stood nearby, staff from the airline's higher management, not the same rude ones from earlier. These were people in suits with serious faces and humble eyes. One woman stepped forward, holding a small folder. She introduced herself as the airline's customer experience director. She bowed slightly and said, "We owe you and your mother a deep apology, Mr. Reeves, and more than just words." Keanu's mother looked at her son, surprised. She hadn't expected anything more, but Keanu remained calm. He listened quietly as the woman continued. "The incident today does not reflect our values. We've already begun reviewing our staff's behavior and training policies. But we also wanted to meet you both in person." She handed Keanu's mother a letter, neatly printed and signed by the airline's CEO. It was a personal letter of apology, expressing deep regret and promising steps to prevent future disrespect to any passenger. His mother read the first few lines, and her eyes softened. The woman also gave her a small golden badge, something the airline rarely gave out. "This is our lifetime courtesy pass," she explained. "You'll never wait in line again, and our best staff will always assist you. It's the least we can do." Keanu's mother hesitated before accepting it. She didn't care about VIP services or rewards, but she saw something sincere in their eyes, something she didn't see earlier that day. Maybe, just maybe, they had learned something from what happened. "I accept," she said quietly, "but not for comfort, for change." The director nodded respectfully. "We understand." They walked together to a private elevator that led to the underground parking area. The staff escorted them to another car waiting below. But this one wasn't just for airport transport. It was Keanu's personal car. He opened the door for his mother himself, helping her inside with quiet care. As they drove away from the airport, the city lights grew brighter. Keanu looked over at his mother. She was holding the letter on her lap, her eyes thoughtful. Do you think they really meant it? She asked. He nodded. I think some of them did. The rest might pretend, but over time, truth shows. She leaned her head back against the seat. I hope the next old woman they meet doesn't have to be anyone's mother to be treated well. Keanu smiled gently. That's the goal, Mom. That's why I didn't shout. That's why I made them look at you and see a human being. They passed by quiet streets, trees gently swaying under the streetlights. The calm of the night felt different now. It wasn't just about going home. It was about leaving behind a story that might ripple through someone else's life. In a small apartment building just a few blocks away, a young airport worker sat watching the news on his phone. The headline read, Keanu Reeves stands up for his mother after she was humiliated by airline staff. The young man had been working on another terminal that day. He hadn't seen what happened, but now he was reading every word, watching every video clip, and something inside him shifted. He thought about the way he had once brushed off an old man's question, how he had laughed with his coworkers when a woman tripped over her bag. Now, he felt something he hadn't felt before. Regret, and more than that, a desire to be better. In another city, a manager at a different airport forwarded the news to her entire team with a message that read, This is how quickly respect turns into disrespect and how kindness turns it back. Back in the car, Keanu's mother finally smiled and whispered, You didn't just protect me today, you taught them too. Keanu replied softly, You taught me first. They drove into the night, not as a celebrity and his mother, but as two souls who had walked through pain and turned it into something bigger than themselves. The car entered the quiet neighborhood where Keanu's house was. The trees along the road stood tall and still, and the air felt fresh after the long journey. His mother looked out the window and saw the familiar streets. She smiled softly, feeling both tired and comforted. It had been a long day, a painful one, but it was ending in a place that felt safe. As the car stopped in front of the house, Keanu stepped out first, then gently helped his mother out. She looked up at the house, its porch lights glowing warmly. It's good to be home, she said. He nodded. It's always good when you're here. He opened the front door and led her inside. The house was simple but beautiful, filled with quiet colors and calm energy. The walls had pictures from his childhood, a few awards and many books. She walked slowly through the hallway, her hand brushing over the old wooden furniture. You've kept everything just the way I remember, she said. Keanu smiled. I always keep your favorite things close. He guided her to the soft couch in the living room and brought her a warm cup of tea. She wrapped her hands around the cup and sighed, not from sadness this time, but from peace. For the first time since the airport, she felt completely at ease, but the day's memory was still fresh and it refused to disappear so easily. Keanu, she said softly, do you think people only listen when someone famous speaks? He sat beside her, thinking for a moment. Sometimes, he said, but sometimes it just takes one person doing the right thing to make others notice. She nodded slowly. Still, it hurts. What if you hadn't been there? He looked at her, his eyes serious. Then someone else should have spoken up, he said. We all have chances to help someone, but most people walk away. She leaned her head against the back of the couch. It felt like I was invisible, she whispered, like I was just in the way. Keanu reached over and took her hand. You were never invisible to me, he said, and now they won't forget you either. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that feels full, not empty, the kind that doesn't need words. Later that evening, the doorbell rang softly. Keanu walked to the door and opened it to find a young woman holding a small package. She was wearing a uniform from a local courier company, but her face looked nervous. Hi, she said. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I saw what happened on the news today. Keanu nodded, surprised. You're not disturbing us, he said. Is everything all right? The young woman took a deep breath. I work part-time at an airport too, she said. I've seen a lot of bad behavior toward older people. I never thought I could say anything, but today I saw you do it calmly with strength, and it made me realize I can say something too. Keanu smiled gently. That means more than you know. She handed him the small package. This was delivered to your old address by mistake, she said. But honestly, I just wanted to thank you. He accepted the package and said, Then thank you for bringing it. She turned to leave, but before she walked away, she added, Your mom reminded me of my grandma. I wish someone had spoken up for her. Keanu closed the door quietly and returned to the living room. His mother looked at him curious. Just someone who wanted to say thank you, he said. She took a deep breath, her eyes shining. Maybe the pain wasn't wasted after all. He sat beside her again. No pain is ever wasted if it helps someone else, he said. Later that night after dinner, they watched an old movie together, one they used to watch when Keanu was young. His mother laughed at the same scenes, cried at the same parts, and Keanu found himself laughing too. Not at the movie, but at her joy. The night passed slowly, softly, like a warm blanket after a storm. And somewhere across the internet, people were still sharing the story. Some wrote comments about how it made them cry. Some said they would treat people better from now on. In one small town, a group of airport workers gathered the next morning for a meeting. Their supervisor stood at the front and played a short video, footage from the airport where Keanu had defended his mother. After the video ended, he looked at his team and said, We can't change the whole world in one day, but we can start here. The staff nodded, quiet and thoughtful. Back at home, Keanu helped his mother prepare for bed. She smiled as he tucked a blanket around her shoulders. You've always been a good boy, she whispered, even when no one was watching. He kissed her forehead gently and said, Because you taught me to be. As she closed her eyes, he sat nearby, just watching, making sure she felt safe. That was all he wanted and all he ever needed to do. The morning sun slowly rose, filling the living room with a soft golden light. Birds outside the window chirped gently, and the world felt quiet and new. Keanu sat in the kitchen, making breakfast the way his mother liked. Simple toast, soft eggs, and a warm cup of tea. He moved calmly with care in every small action. It wasn't just breakfast. It was love in the shape of food. His mother slowly walked into the room, dressed in a soft sweater. Her steps were slow, but she smiled when she saw the table set. You're still the same boy who made me burnt toast when he was 9, she said, laughing gently. Keanu smiled. I've improved a little since then. They sat at the table together, eating quietly, enjoying each other's presence. The world outside was moving fast, but inside this house, time moved with warmth and patience. After breakfast, Keanu opened his laptop to check a few emails. His mother sat nearby, flipping through an old photo album. She laughed softly as she looked at old pictures. Keanu as a little boy playing with a toy sword, dressed in clothes 2 sizes too big. Suddenly, Keanu paused. Mom, he said, look at this. He turned his screen toward her. It was an article from a major news site. The headline read, Respect starts at home. Keanu Reeves, quiet stand for his mother, inspires millions. The article told their story in a simple and honest way. It didn't focus on drama or fame. Instead, it showed how one moment of kindness could ripple through the world. Keanu scrolled down, and the page was filled with comments. Thousands of them. One said, I saw how my own mother was treated badly last week. This story made me promise to never stay silent again. Another wrote, We need more people like him, not just in movies, but in real life. His mother read each comment slowly, her fingers lightly touching the screen. Her eyes grew misty. I never thought something like this would happen, she whispered. Keanu smiled softly. Neither did I. But maybe it needed to. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from the airline CEO, thanking him again and letting him know that 3 airport workers had already volunteered to lead new training programs on respectful treatment for the elderly and disabled. Keanu read the message and looked at his mother. "It's working," he said. "Real change is starting." She nodded, her heart full. "That means more to me than any gift," she said, "knowing that someone else's mother or father will be treated kindly because of what we went through." Later in the day, they went for a walk in a quiet park nearby. The trees swayed gently in the breeze and children played in the distance. His mother held Keanu's arm as they walked slowly along the path. As they passed by a bench, an elderly couple smiled at them. The woman said, "We saw the news. Thank you for standing up for all of us." Keanu's mother smiled warmly. "We just did what anyone should do," she replied. The couple nodded and continued walking, and for a brief moment, strangers felt like family. After the walk, they sat on a bench under a tall tree. The leaves above moved with the wind, letting bits of sunlight fall on their faces. Keanu looked at his mother and said, "Do you remember when you told me, kindness is never wasted?" She smiled. "Of course." He nodded. "You were right." She looked at him with deep love in her eyes. "Kindness is like a seed," she said. "It grows quietly, but one day, it becomes a tree that gives shade to others." He took her hand and held it gently. No words were needed now, just quiet understanding. That night, as she prepared for bed, Keanu helped her settle in. He adjusted her pillow, placed her favorite blanket over her, and kissed her forehead. She looked up at him, her voice soft and full of peace. "You know, Keanu, I used to worry that the world was losing its heart." He sat beside her. "I used to think the same." She smiled and closed her eyes. "But today, you helped me believe again," Keanu whispered. "It was your heart first." "Mom, I just followed it." She held his hand one last time before falling asleep, her breathing steady and calm. Outside, the stars filled the sky, far above the cities, the plains, and the noise. But below, in one quiet home, the light of a small act of kindness continued to shine, not just for a moment, but for the world to remember. And in that soft silence, one thing became clear. True strength isn't loud. It doesn't come with power or titles. It comes from love, respect, and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when no one else does, because in the end, the world doesn't remember the noise. It remembers the kindness that echoed far beyond it.